This is the MiG-29, a Soviet fighter jet created in the 70s. It was designed to be fast, agile, and lethal in aerial combat. And in that sense, this aircraft is excellent at what it does: flying, turning, and fighting. Today, Ukraine uses these same jets in a modern war. But now, they need to do something completely different: attack long-distance targets with surgical precision. But here we have a big problem. This jet was made in 1980. Its computers don't even know what global positioning system is. So, how do you make such an old machine use new satellite-guided weapons? Well, the Ukrainians found the solution, and it's simple and brilliant at the same time. To help you understand better, let me tell you an amazing story that happened in May of this year. It was around 5:45 in the morning on May 26th when a Ukrainian pilot was getting ready for a mission that seemed impossible. He was going to attack a Federal Security Service base, the Russian Security Service. And this was right in Russian territory, the target being the headquarters of the Federal Security Service in Belgorod. I'm not referring to a typical warehouse or a regular military base. I'm talking about the command center of Putin's intelligence services in that region. A very important and heavily guarded target. And this is where our story starts to get intriguing. The pilot was going to pull off this feat using that MiG-29 from 40 years ago, carrying French bombs that theoretically shouldn't even work on that aircraft. They worked. Strange. Well, the secret to making it work was stuck to the cockpit panel. An iPad. That's right, a regular iPad, the kind you use to watch Netflix or browse the internet. But this iPad was running special Ukrainian software that did something incredible. It translated modern global positioning system information into a language that the French bombs could understand. Think of it this way. It's like if you took a Walkman from the 80s and managed to make it play music from Spotify. It seems impossible, doesn't it? But the Ukrainian engineers did exactly that. The iPad received the target coordinates, used its own global positioning system receiver for navigation, and then converted all of that into a format that the bombs could process. And do you know what's even more impressive about this? A military integration to do this in the traditional way would take years and cost millions of dollars. But the Ukrainian solution took just a few weeks of work and $500 to buy the tablet. But let's get back to our pilot, because at 6:15 in the morning, he was flying at just 50 meters above the Ukrainian landscape, so low that the jet's turbines were making the wheat fields sway and scaring birds into terrified flocks. And the reason he was flying so dangerously low lies in physics, and it's brilliant. You see, Russian air defense systems, especially the famous S-400, can detect and destroy targets at 400 kilometers away. But that only happens if they can see the target. And this is where the curvature of the Earth comes in. No matter how powerful a radar is, it can't see through the planet. At 50 meters of altitude, the horizon of a ground radar is only 25 kilometers. That means our pilot was completely invisible until he got really close to the Russians. But he was in a race against time. In exactly 3 minutes, he would have to give up that invisibility and climb straight into the sights of the enemy defense systems. The aircraft was carrying 2 French armament air-sol modulaire hammer bombs, each weighing 250 kilograms. But calling it a bomb is almost unfair, because the armament air-sol modulaire hammer is actually a hybrid missile. Let me explain the difference. A regular bomb simply falls. The famous American Joint Direct Attack munition uses wings to glide to the target. The French air-to-surface missile, on the other hand, has its own rocket motor, and that makes all the difference. After it's launched, this motor ignites and pushes the bomb to speeds close to supersonic. That's not just falling with style. It's powered flight that extends the range to more than 70 kilometers and gives it enough energy to pierce armored targets. Each of these bombs costs more than most people's houses and can deliver an explosion through a specific window 70 kilometers away. The accuracy is just 1 meter. This bomb was carefully chosen for the mission that morning. At 6:22, our pilot reached the mission's critical point. He pulled the stick hard, and the MiG-29 responded instantly, its nose rising at 45 degrees. The G-forces crushed the pilot against the seat, while the altimeter spun out of control. 1,000 meters, 2,000, 3,000. Suddenly, the radar warning receiver in the cockpit erupted in electronic chaos. All the air defense systems in Western Russia had just detected an enemy fighter climbing straight into their engagement zone. The nearest S-400 system, located in the southeast of Belgorod, began to paint the MiG with its fire control radar. In seconds, the fire control system would have a firing solution, but the pilot had an advantage, a surprise. The Russians had less than 45 seconds from detection to being able to effectively engage the target. And their procedures were designed with conventional attack profiles in mind. They would never expect Ukraine to do something so crazy. At 5,000 meters altitude, the pilot reached the launch point. The iPad showed the optimal firing parameters. 2 sharp thuds shook the fuselage as the AESM bombs were released from the wings. Immediately, he rolled upside down and pulled hard, performing a maneuver that would have impressed even the inventor of this technique in World War I. The MiG-29 curved through the sky, trading altitude for speed as it dove back to the safety of low flight. Behind him, the 2 bombs followed their path toward the target. Their rocket engines ignited with a flash, speeding them along the ballistic arc toward Belgorod. The Global Positioning System receivers locked on to the satellite signals, while the inertial navigation systems measured every small deviation. The bombs were now flying on their own, making hundreds of micro-corrections per second to ensure they hit their pre-programmed coordinates exactly. The maneuver that the pilot had just performed has a name: toss bombing. It was developed during the Cold War, when nuclear bomber fighters needed to deliver bombs without flying directly over their targets. The physics is simple: climb at a steep angle, release the bombs on an upward trajectory, and then escape while momentum carries the weapons to the target. Simple in theory, insane in practice, especially against modern air defenses. The Russian response was quick but useless. two interceptor missiles launched from their platforms, rushing to intercept the MiG-29. But the jet was already back at treetop level, performing evasive maneuvers as it raced back home. The interceptors, designed to take down high-flying bombers, couldn't track a target hugging the ground. They passed harmlessly overhead, their proximity fuses finding nothing but empty sky. And here is the crucial point. The S-400 had a fatal weakness. Despite all its sophistication, the system needed about 10 seconds from detection to engagement when dealing with low-altitude targets that appeared suddenly. First, the search radar had to detect and classify the threat. Then, the fire control radar needed to lock on and develop a firing solution. The missile itself needed 3 seconds from the launch command to leave the rail. And then, there was still the flight time to the target. Against high-flying bombers or cruise missiles with predictable trajectories, this sequence worked perfectly. Against a fighter performing a toss bombing maneuver, it was catastrophically slow. Even worse, the S-400 was optimized for large aircraft and missiles, not for small guided bombs. The interceptor missiles are massive weapons designed to take down bombers, not surgical instruments to intercept precision munitions. In less than 2 minutes, the bombs would hit the target. The Federal Security Service officers in Belgorod had no idea this was going to happen. Smart bombs launched in their direction, guided by satellites they couldn't see and technology they couldn't stop. At 6:27, the first armament air-sol modulaire hammer bomb pierced the roof of the Federal Security Service headquarters. The fuse, programmed for a delay of 25 milliseconds, counted down with electronic precision as the warhead plunged through the upper structure of the building. Upon detonation, its 87 kilos of explosive converted from solid to gas in microseconds. The shock wave expanded at 8,000 meters per second, creating overpressures exceeding 200 pounds per square inch, enough to eliminate anyone inside the building. But the physics of destruction was just beginning. The explosion inside the enclosed structure created a phenomenon called reflected overpressure. The shock wave ricocheted off the surviving walls and floors, doubling and tripling its destructive power. The windows didn't just shatter, they exploded outward in a shower of glass that would later be found embedded in buildings 300 meters away. Office furniture became projectiles. File cabinets full of classified documents turned into metal confetti. The second bomb arrived 0.3 of a second later, hitting a spot 20 meters from the first impact. By this point, the structural integrity of the building was already compromised. Load-bearing walls had disappeared and support columns were shattered. The second explosion hit a structure already on the verge of collapse and delivered the final blow. The destruction spread through the weakened structure like a destructive wave, causing what engineers call progressive collapse. Floor by floor, the Federal Security Service headquarters began to devour itself. The fourth floor collapsed onto the third, adding its mass to the destruction. Then, the fifth floor joined the cascade. Each collapse added kinetic energy to the disaster. In less than 5 seconds, what had been a 5-story symbol of Russian state security became a smoldering pile of rubble and secrets. And the significance of this attack goes far beyond the physical destruction. The Federal Security Service is not just an office building. It's the direct successor to the Soviet KGB and a central pillar of Putin's regime. This was the first attack on the Russian intelligence services in the entire war. More importantly, it happened in Belgorod, Russian territory. Attacks inside Russia carry immense symbolic weight. They directly challenge the Russian narrative that the special military operation is a distant, professional conflict with no cost to ordinary Russians. When air raid sirens sound and buildings explode in a major Russian city, the war becomes undeniable and something happening close to home. This is a deliberate Ukrainian strategy to increase the cost of the war. For Russia, forcing Putin to spend political capital and military resources on the defense of his own territory. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this whole operation is what it represents. A new era in warfare. No longer about who has the most expensive weapons, but about who is more creative and adaptable. Ukraine took a 40-year-old fighter jet, added a $500 tablet and $2 million French bombs each, and created a capability that challenges one of the most sophisticated defense systems in the world. And the most ironic thing about all this is that the S-400 itself has now become a target. Its powerful radars are like beacons in the dark, broadcasting their location to Ukrainian electronic intelligence. Russia is now forced to use short-range defense systems to protect the S-400 itself. In other words, the shield needs its own shield. This impressive story, which happened in May 2025, shows that we have entered a new era, the era of asymmetric innovation. In other words, small forces with creativity and adaptability can defeat larger and more expensive systems. An era where software and intelligence surpass brute hardware. The future of war no longer belongs only to superpowers with the biggest budgets. It belongs to those who can innovate faster, adapt better, and think outside the box. And all of that started with an iPad stuck to the dashboard of a MiG-29. Now tell me in the comments, in your opinion, what is most important in modern warfare? Is it having the most expensive and advanced equipment, or having the creativity to use what you have in an innovative way? I want to know what you think about this. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share the video with that person who enjoys these military stories. See you next time.